Welcome back to a new episode of Podcast on the Brink, Wednesday, October 22nd. Exactly 2 weeks away from the start of the Indiana basketball season, the first year of Darren DeVries in Bloomington. Although not a ton of buzz right now for IU basketball, considering the start of IU football season, 7-0, ranked number 2 in the Associated Press Top 25 poll. I was looking, I think it's 13 days until the first CFP rankings come out, so we'll get a better indication of where Indiana actually stands in the eyes of the committee coming up here in less than 2 weeks. Before we get to this week's guest on Podcast on the Brink, Tony Adragna of IU Film Room, wanted to take a quick moment to ask if you get a chance, please leave us a rating and review over on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I've been seeing a lot of those lately. Really appreciate the support. If you're on YouTube watching us there, please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel. I've had tremendous growth in recent months of the YouTube channel, continuing to try to push closer to 10,000 subscribers there. So every subscriber counts. Please support us over there. Tony, it's been a while. I think it's been since the spring. You've been busy. I've been busy. Reached out earlier this week and wanted to have you on. Appreciate you taking the time. How's it going? I know things are busy over there. New coaching job. And obviously gearing up for the basketball season, but how you been?
Yeah, I've been fantastic. I always appreciate coming on podcasts on the Brink, and whenever I get those DMs, I'm always excited to make some time to get on and talk some IU hoops and just hoops in general with you. So things have been good. Like you said, busy but excited. To me, it's like Christmas time, like basketball season's coming around, and then you get the added bonus, like you mentioned, of IU football. These past couple years, certainly this year, number 2 in the country. It's like I'm living a fever dream. So it's been a lot of fun and certainly excited to chat some hoops with you today.
For those that don't know, Tony is actually back in the coaching game. I know people gave you a hard time on X over the last year. Are you actually a coach? Well, he actually is a coach now, so you have to respect that. He's the head coach now at Greenwood Christian Academy, 1A school in Indiana. How did that opportunity come about, and what, I guess, factors led to you getting back into the? I know you have a lot of young kids running around there at the house and busy with work, but why did you decide right now was the time to get back into coaching?
Yeah, so actually, for all the haters out there, I'm coach times 3 right now. I'm coaching my son in soccer, I'm coaching Greenwood Christian Academy, and then I'm coaching my son in biddy ball basketball right now as well. So I don't know what I'm doing with my life. I'm just creating more and more work for myself, but no, it's fun. In terms of the Greenwood Christian Academy job, honestly, it's one that I've always respected. Johnny Marlin, former Hoosier, and then All-American at Indiana Wesleyan, had that job. It really built the program up. And be quite frank, it's 5 minutes from my house, and its values align with where I'm at. I feel like in the state of Indiana, just where everything's at, like basically the transfer portal's opened up in high school basketball as well. I feel like I can have a greater impact at a smaller school on lives and on the game. I'm not just trying to accumulate talent. I'm really trying to mold and develop a program and players. So that's kind of how that came to be. The job opened up. Jackson Williams did a great job there. He's now the head coach at Martinsville. So that job opened up. It's close to the house, and like I said, values align. And one thing led to another, and around like the end of May, I was named the head coach there and really hit the ground running. In the state of Indiana, June is huge for basketball in the off season. So in June, I think I coached like 18 games. We had workouts Monday through Thursday. So it's kind of a baptism by fire, just trying to get to know my team and stuff. But I'm super fired up about it. Our first official practice is less than 3 weeks away, and I'm excited. And I have a sneaking suspicion there'll be some folks keeping their eye on the scores of my games, and I'm confident that when those L's come, I'll hear about it a little bit, which is fine. It's all in good fun, but I'm excited for it. I'm super fired up to be the head coach there.
Hopefully nobody starts a Greenwood Christian Academy film room to mock you on X, but I could see some crazy out there doing it.
Hey, I'm here for it. If somebody wants to break down my film and help me out, let's do it. I need all the help I can get.
Just one other quick question on that. I know you spent some time at Southport coaching. Getting back into it, how much has the landscape changed in terms of rules and different things in terms of player movement, and how will that impact just not just your program but other programs in the state of Indiana moving forward?
Yeah, honestly, it's nuts. It's I'm all for like player empowerment and guys being able to make decisions that they feel is best. I just wish it was that player only making those decisions, and there wasn't outside influences. But that's the nature of it. We're not naive enough to think that that's how things work. But yeah, it's as I mentioned, the transfer portal, if you will, is kind of open up in the state of Indiana. You get one free transfer as long as you do it for your senior year. There will certainly be some people that really try to latch onto that and figure out how to navigate that. It's part of it. There's still not supposed to be any recruiting or anything of that sort, but as we know, that does happen, especially in the state of Indiana. But for me, like I love to see though, just how the game's evolving. There's still, I mean, the state of Indiana high school coaching is second to none. Garrett Weininger up at Fishers, he actually had a press conference yesterday. They're playing in a Dayton event. And he took a couple jabs at prep school coaches. He was talking about the reason that Indiana and Ohio programs beat these prep schools at this tournament is because they're better coached, which I thought was a pretty funny little jab there. And he also said, and I've got two juniors that are very, very good, and I know all these prep schools are going to be watching them and calling them and telling them how good their program is after they're done watching them. So I appreciated that from Coach Weininger because it was very real. But, yeah, there's a lot of movement, a lot of stuff going on in the state. But, ultimately it's so much fun to be a part of. And the basketball in the state of Indiana is still second to none in my opinion, and there's so much talent, and even at the 1A level where I'm coaching, there's still so much talent, and kids really, really want to be good and get better. And I mentioned Johnny Marlin. He's got a training academy on the south side of Indianapolis. He's got hundreds and hundreds of kids flowing in and out that just want to get better. So I don't think that the state of Indiana basketball is going anywhere in terms of the talent that it can produce. But times certainly are changing, but it's kind of like Coach Signetti says, like, you just got to kind of roll with those, and if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. So you just kind of got to really dive into it and just play by the rules and hope that everything works out in your favor.
Yeah, well, good luck with everything with that. We'll obviously be following as closely as we can. I know IU community is very thankful for all the stuff you've done over the years with the film room, and we'll be rooting for your success. So, again, good luck with that. And I know you love the game of basketball, so I think it's great that you're getting back into it. Obviously, it's a smaller school. I think a lot of times you can have a bigger impact at a place like that because you can work. You have less kids to try to deal with, and you can make a bigger impact. So good luck and
Yeah,
congratulations on that opportunity. So
thank you.
obviously we're here to talk IU basketball. And there was an exhibition game on Friday night, not a very competitive exhibition game, but as I watched it and texted with a couple people throughout the game, I thought at times in years past maybe that it would have been a game that would have been a little bit closer than 60 points. We've kind of had the evidence to see that, so I was impressed from the standpoint of Indiana kind of came out and put their foot down immediately, and it was an inferior opponent, but obviously can't take a ton away from a game against an NAIA opponent, but I'm sure you watched it. What were your just big picture thoughts on getting a first glimpse of Darian DeVries' first IU team there in Assembly Hall?
Yeah, I was watching that with one of my buddies. I was down in Orange Beach, Alabama, with a buddy of mine and our families, and we were watching it. And I was like, we're 2 years removed from IU being down at halftime to University of Indianapolis in an exhibition game. It's not out of the question that some of the times these exhibitions aren't necessarily great basketball. And even look back to IU's exhibition last season against Marion, and was just kind of like looking at stats and things that they did. Last year against Marion, Indiana just pounded the ball inside where they obviously had a size advantage. Malik Renew and Omar Balla were 15 for 15 inside the arc. And so really, obviously you take advantage of your size in basketball because that's how it works, but like you don't really get to see a lot in that. They went 6 for 25 from three last season in that exhibition. This season, obviously 15 for 30 from the outside. And while you certainly take advantage of size and things, it wasn't like Indiana was just pounding it inside and saying, go one-on-one and go to work. Like, there's actually some concepts in offense and things that they were doing that was exciting to me. So I posted a short little breakdown on X that was essentially just breaking down some of the actions that Indiana was doing. And a lot of them were like actions that you'll see in the NBA, actions you'll see like Greg McDermott, Matt Painter, Dan Hurley run that are kind of what you would call modern actions. A lot of ghost screens, which is basically like when a guy attempts to go set a screen but kind of slips out of it before he sets it, which things are just that are hard to guard. I mean, that's why ultimately teams do it, right? And so I liked a lot of that. They ran this 5-out, what you would call delay action, which is you get the ball in your five-man's hands with a 5-out alignment, and he can kind of make some decisions from there. They got a Tucker DeVries wide-open three off a flare screen out of that action. And so ultimately what I liked was, Indiana didn't run a bunch of sets and things like that. They really were playing out of concepts. And to me, that's the most exciting part about this. Obviously, defensively, they're just going to be able to overpower a team like Marion, so you don't get to see a ton of what they're going to do schematically. They switch some ball screen stuff, but they're just a superior opponent, so you don't get to see a ton defensively. But offensively was where I was most intrigued because there was a lot of modern actions. What I talked about a lot in my video was the short roll action that Indiana was running, which is basically like when you set that ball screen, instead of just diving straight to the rim, you kind of dive like 15 feet. The guy catches the ball there. A lot of times it was Tucker DeVries actually catching it. And then you're in a 2-on-1 situation, and you can make reads from there. And obviously he made great reads. Indiana got a ton of wide-open three-point looks out of that. Obviously them shooting the basketball 15 from 30 from deep. It was the most threes Indiana had made in a game since the Tom Crean era. Like, those are the things that it's like, oh, okay. Like, I was talking with somebody, and they were like, I kind of forgot how much I had to, like, try to talk myself into what Indiana's been doing the last 8 seasons. Like, okay, like, yeah, I guess that works. And that's not to, like, I'm really not trying to, like, put down previous regimes, but it's just, like, their style of play wasn't necessarily aesthetically pleasing, whereas, like, you watch this, and again, it's Marion. It's the rest of the season we could watch and be like, whoa, this is not aesthetically pleasing. But in that game, in that instance, you saw things that give you kind of hope for the future of, like, this is going to be a fun brand of basketball to watch, which was most exciting to me.
Yeah, even on the 33s attempted, making 15. I mean, again, not trying to go back into time and bash other IU teams, but I don't feel like there's been many teams in the last 8 years dating back to the Tom Crean era that would have made 15 out of 30, even with light defense being played on them. So the fact that they actually stepped up to the line and made those shots, and Lamar Wilkerson wasn't even a huge part of it. So it was guys like Trent Sisley and Tucker DeVries. I want to talk about both of those guys and get your thoughts on that. Ryan did a film session breakdown of Tucker DeVries, which obviously, again, we're caveating all of this with the fact that they were playing Marion, but it was also the first time we've seen him play in an IU uniform in Assembly Hall. I was impressed with just how creative he was in terms of getting his shots. He obviously took some threes that were wide open there, but he had one play kind of where he did a little fadeaway attempt in the lane. Seems like he's going to be really good in the mid-range. And also he had a backdoor cut there for a dunk at one point, I believe. What do you make of just the way Indiana seems like they're going to utilize him this year? Is he going to be kind of their go-to guy offensively in your mind? And are there other things maybe that we didn't see on Friday night that we could see once the season starts for Tucker?
Yeah, to me, he's one of the most slept-on guys in college basketball coming into this season because he didn't play a lot last season. He was coming off an injury, obviously, or a fake injury if you ask the West Virginia fans. And he's one of the best players in college basketball. He just is. He's older as well, which we've seen that's a recipe for success in college basketball. But to me, with him, he's got such gravity on the floor, meaning, teams have to account for him no matter what he's doing. There was a play I highlighted in my breakdown where somebody drove to the basket and there was help side from the opposite corner. It left Connor Enright wide open. Well, Tucker DeVries was on the wing next to him. That guy's not going to leave Tucker DeVries wide open. So, therefore, Enright had the most open three you're going to get in college basketball because his man helped, and then that guy's not leaving Tucker, or you're going to leave, a 40-some% three-point shooter wide open. So, for me, that's the biggest thing with him. Like, obviously, there's going to be games where he's going to be knocked down, he's going to hit everything, but what also is nice is they're going to run actions for him that ultimately he's going to get somebody else open based on the gravity that he has on the floor. So that's what I look forward to. Obviously, it's a cliche, but he's a coach's son. All indications are that he's probably going to end up being a great coach someday himself. The people that I've talked to around the program are just like, he's so smart about the game. He just understands everything. And obviously, he's running his dad's system, for the fifth season. So he's very, very comfortable in what he's going to do, which to me, like, you can't discount that. A guy that just knows it like the back of his hand, that can get everybody else in the right spots. There was times where he initiated the offense as well, which isn't really something that we have seen from Indiana in quite some time. Like, usually it's like, all right, Miles Rice is the point guard. He's going to initiate the offense, and then they're going to go from there. Whereas, in this system, it looked like, hey, they're going to kind of have some point forward stuff where Tucker's going to initiate the offense. So ultimately, yeah, I think Tucker DeVries is a very, very, very good basketball player, and like I said, kind of slept on. He's transferring to a Big Ten program, a brand new team, kind of a forgotten piece in college basketball. But when he's on and healthy, like, he is a dynamite basketball player. So I think he's going to have obviously a huge impact on this Indiana team, but in more ways than just being able to score the ball.
Yeah, you look at the way that Bennett Sturts is being viewed coming into the Big Ten from the similar conference, same conference, Missouri Valley. He's projected by most to be a top 3 or 4 player in the Big Ten, a potential All-American. Tucker DeVries is obviously last season only played 8 games, but the 2 years prior to that, he was the player of the year in the Missouri Valley Conference. So throw out last year, if he's coming in as the 2-time MVC player of the year into the Big Ten, I think there's a lot more hype. So I think you make a really good point. I agree with that. I was looking at our preseason ranking the other day of our top 40 Big Ten players. We had him 15. I was thinking to myself, I think there's a pretty good chance he can outperform that. Again, a lot of things have to go right for Indiana. He has to help them win games. But from statistic standpoint, he's going to average, I think, 5 or 6 rebounds, probably 3 assists. He's averaged over a steal for his career, and I think he's probably good for at least 14, 15 points a game. So that's a pretty good line. As you mentioned, good three-point shooter, good free throw shooter. Coach's son makes a lot of good decisions. And I think is the one thing that I really just appreciate from watching, not obviously his film this year, but in previous years, just his feel for the game and his awareness of situations. He's not the best athlete, but he can still get his shot when he needs to because he understands just the fundamentals of basketball and where he needs to be in positioning. So that's really impressive. The other guy that has really been impressive dating back to the Puerto Rico trips, Trent Sisley played terrific down in Puerto Rico, continued that on Friday night. Again, it's Marion, but he's not going to make all of his threes in every game. If he does, then he's going to be a first-round pick in the draft next summer, but he made 4 threes. He's the guy that I think a lot of people thought maybe coming in it was going to take him a year to play a significant role. But you look at Indiana's front court this year, and there's not a lot of depth there. Josh Harris is currently out with an injury. We don't know how soon he's going to be back. I think Trent Sisley going into the season is 6th or 7th, maybe 7th man on this team going into the season. What's impressed you most about him? And do you agree that he looks like a guy that is going to probably play 20, 25 minutes a game as a freshman?
I absolutely do agree with that, especially if, like you said, the Puerto Rico trip leading right into the first exhibition has just been dynamite. I took a couple jabs at prep schools kind of jokingly earlier in the pod, but him going to Montverde was probably the best thing that he could have possibly done in terms of his development. And I say that as obviously a head coach of a school team that you kind of hate to see that, but at the same time, he made a great decision for himself, and went and played against top guys in the country, night in, night out. For a great coach that does develop his players and isn't just trying to accumulate talent. So, him doing that, I believe, really enhanced his game. Even when I would dive into some film from his Montverde stuff, it was like, wow, I didn't realize he had that in his game. And then like the Marion dunk, I don't think people necessarily expect that. I don't think people necessarily think like he's a great athlete, but he is. Again, another guy that he's got a great understanding of the game. Obviously, his dad worked with him a ton in growing up, and it shows that he really just has a great feel. And then he just bought in, right, to Coach DeVries' system. And I believe that plays a big factor. Like, he just understands where to be on the floor. He runs the floor well. He plays extremely hard. Like, all the little things that you kind of want in a player as a coach, like he does. And so that ultimately is going to translate to him getting time on the floor. And so, like, I don't think he's necessarily going to have a huge impact scoring the ball night in, night out, but I think he's just going to do the right things. That's going to be hard for Coach DeVries to keep him off the floor. So he's been extremely impressive. With freshmen, it's usually like that January wall where you're not used to playing a schedule of this caliber night in, night out, especially against Big Ten teams that are going to kind of bruise you. So I'm interested to kind of see how he progresses through that. But I do think the prep school schedule, they play essentially like October to April on that prep school schedule. So I do think that also prepared him for kind of the grind of the Big Ten season. So where some freshmen may start trailing off, he may kind of leap them. And so that's another piece of it where I think his conditioning level is probably in a really good spot to where his body obviously looks good for a freshman in terms of his strength. So I think those are things where usually with the freshman, you're like, they can kind of trail off. I think that he's actually suited well to kind of keep pushing through that kind of freshman wall a lot of guys hit and excel and be a huge piece for Indiana, hopefully into March.
What's your biggest question mark just in terms of a weakness or something the Indiana fans should be thinking about, potentially concerned about this team that opponents could potentially exploit?
Yeah, defense and rebounding, and I think it's just because of the size that Indiana lacks. Obviously Reed Bailey is their tallest guy, but kind of a thin stature, and also coming from a mid-major program in conference. And so I think that's the natural kind of thought process is how are they going to compete with these Big Ten bruisers? You've got some teams that'll start 2 7-footers, and Indiana doesn't have that in terms of size. But also, I struggle to really think it's going to be a huge weakness with what DeVries was able to do last season with West Virginia in terms of the defensive side of the ball. I mean, that's the reason that they should have been in the NCAA tournament, was their defense. And they lost Tucker, and he really had those guys buy in on the defensive end, and didn't really have a huge like rim protection threat or anything like that. So to me, it's in my thought process of like what will their defense and rebounding look like, just because of their natural lack of height and kind of brute strength. But at the end of the day, too, I'm like, I don't know, man. They were pretty solid last year at West Virginia, with a similar makeup to this roster. So that's kind of what's in my head. Obviously, a lot of guys have got to make leaps in terms of their conference affiliation to playing Big Ten night in, night out. So that's another one that I think is a natural thought process as well, is just like, will these guys be able to make that leap and that jump? But ultimately, that's not as uncommon anymore for guys to make that jump and still be able to be productive. And in a lot of ways, it's easier because they're not the focal point of the team like they were in the past. And so things open up a little bit more for them. And so those are the two things that I think are like, all right, I can see how if national pundits talked about this team and whatnot, those would be things that are talking points and make some sense.
Is there a player or maybe it's a player or two that you're intrigued to see in terms of how their game translates to this level that moved up?
Yeah, I think Connerway is the big one. He was dynamite, and really on the defensive end, especially like he's just got quick hands. His finishing at the rim was unique. Like everything was kind of crafty and not just like brute strength. So he's one where I'm just like I've got a lot of intrigue because he's also the head of the snake, right? On both offensively and defensively. Like I talked about West Virginia last year. Small was kind of their head of the snake, and they went kind of as he went, especially once Tucker went down. So, does Indiana have that in them, which is ultimately Connerway? I don't know. So he's one where I think he's going to have a huge impact on how far and how good this team can be. Naturally being the point guard. Obviously, they have Enright as well that can kind of play that on the ball offense and defense too. But ultimately, I think Connerway is kind of the guy that they're going to rely upon to push the pace offensively, but defensively really impact the ball handlers and what teams are trying to do on the offensive end as well.
Yeah, the one guy that comes to mind when I think about that, and maybe it's just because we haven't seen him, is Nick Dorn coming from over from Elon. I didn't know a ton about him. I watched some film, but then when I saw him a couple weeks ago at their open practice, he wasn't participating. He was doing kind of the non-contact stuff, but he's a legit 6'7" and built like a football player, but moves pretty well. To have him on the wing potentially along with Tucker and Lamar, you could have three guys that are, potential knockdown shooters on the court at the same time. I think that's very intriguing. Initially when he committed, I thought Josiah Miles had a chance to be one of those guys. Didn't play particularly well down in Puerto Rico. Didn't struggled really again in the Marion exhibition. So I'm curious to see how he develops as well. But I think from an offensive standpoint, this team is going to cause nightmares on a lot of nights for teams just because of the variety of guys that they have that can shoot and score the ball. I agree with you on the defense and rebounding. We'll see how that all develops, but I think from a coaching standpoint, DeVries will be able to scheme certain things on certain nights, whether that's the way they're going to do post doubles or team rebound on the defensive end. I think they're going to be able to mitigate a lot of those issues. Now, again, I say that knowing full well that there's going to be games like the Michigan game where they're trying to deal with Ade Mara and Morez Johnson and Lindeborg all at the same time. That's going to be tough for Indiana to contend with. That's going to be tough for any team in the Big Ten to contend with. They're going to be a difficult matchup. So there's not a lot of teams like that, and I think Indiana is going to be able to overcome some of those obstacles just with good coaching and smart strategy. So looking ahead to Sunday's game against Baylor, admittedly, I've not looked at all at Baylor. I think they have a completely new roster, but what are you looking to see on Sunday from Indiana against a team that obviously from another power conference team with a coach that has won a national championship. So we know they're going to be well prepared, even if it is a brand new roster. But I think this is really the first moment where we might learn something about Indiana and what they're going to look like this season. Again, Indiana went on the road last year in an exhibition game and beat Tennessee, and we saw how much that ultimately meant. But I do think there's more intrigue coming into this game than what we've seen maybe out of the Puerto Rico trip or the Marion exhibition.
Yeah, I want to see what they do in terms of the concepts and things that they were running against Marion and how that translates against obviously a P4 opponent that has a lot of athletes and is just going to occupy more space than a team like Marion's able to. Like Indiana had great spacing against Marion, but at the end of the day, too, they didn't have a bunch of guys that have 7-foot wingspans, guarding them. And so that'll be what I'm most intrigued about offensively is just like how do those things that they were doing and doing very well against Marion translate the short roll stuff. Obviously, that's all on film, too, so teams can kind of scheme around that as well. That's like my biggest intrigue just in general is like, what does Indiana have to do to counter what teams will take away as the season progresses? Because that's kind of where last season and seasons prior where I thought Indiana struggled was once teams took away a Malik Renew or an Umar Ballo or whatever, and they knew what Indiana was doing to try to get them the ball in places they like to, they struggled with kind of the counterpunch. And so, not that Baylor's going to just dive heavy into Indiana's Marion film and try to take everything they did away, but so that's what I'm looking forward to. And then defensively is kind of the things we talked about. Baylor is historically a really athletic team that plays at a good pace. They're going to push the pace, and how does Indiana combat that defensively? I'm excited to kind of dive into that film because I think we'll get more of a glimpse of what Indiana's doing schematically on defense. DeVries talked about it a lot. Like, he doesn't have a lot of rules for his defense. Like that, they were like, do you switch 1 through 4? And he was like, I don't want them thinking too hard. Like, it's more of a feel thing. Like, they got to play with each other to figure out, like, should he and I switch when there's an off-ball screen and things like that. And I'm sure they drill that, and it's not as open as that quote probably made it seem. But at the end of the day, too, like, I do think he truly means that, and that's how he coaches in his philosophy. And so I want to see kind of what that looks like. Indiana will certainly make mistakes, and then there'll be things that they can clean up. So overall, just there's a ton of intrigue, right? It's the first big opponent that we've seen Indiana play. Now counting Puerto Rico and then Marion, it's 4 teams that Indiana would never play, in a NCAA event, and now you're finally getting that. And so you really kind of be able to test metals and see what they can do against an opponent that would be of their caliber, if you will. And so, yeah, ton of intrigue. I really just want to see the X's and O's of it and what DeVries is kind of scheming up on both sides of the ball. That's my most excited part every time Indiana hires a new coach is it's like, what are they going to do? And for the first time, again, not trying to dog the last regimes, but Archie Miller and Mike Woodson were more alike than different in terms of how they schemed the game. DeVries is a complete 180. And so that's what I'm most excited about is, like, there's going to be new things, and they're trying to get shooters open and stuff like that. So I'm sure Ryan's in a similar boat with his film breakdowns. It's like there's a lot of new stuff. Like, you're not, like, trying to bang your head against a wall trying to figure out what they're going to do or what you can create content for. Like, there's a lot there that you can kind of pull out. So that's what I'm most excited about.
Yeah, it'll be 1 p.m. on Sunday afternoon on Big Ten Plus. So, again, if you've not watched anything up to this point, I would suggest at least diving in to that game because I think you'll learn something more than what we've learned up to this point. And then the second game of the season is Marquette and Chicago, so it's not like Indiana has a kind of a slow ramp to get to another Power 4 opponent. They're going to play Alabama A&M to open the season. Then they're going to go to Chicago and play Marquette on a neutral court, which is a pretty important game, I think, for non-conference performance because Indiana, they obviously have the opportunity against Kansas State, Louisville, Kentucky. Look like 2 games that are going to be very difficult to win. So I think Marquette's going to be a game that they probably want to go up there and get a win just for non-conference performance reasons. Don't want to put too much pressure on yourself to have to go win 12 or 13 Big Ten games in your first season. So we'll be looking forward to that. Tony, thanks for making the time. I know you're busy, as we mentioned at the top, and good luck with everything with the new coaching gig and with the family. Hope everything's well over there. And thanks again for taking the time.
Absolutely. Always appreciate coming on.
Thanks, everybody, as always, for listening to Podcast on the Brink, as we mentioned at the top. If you enjoy the show, please leave us a rating and a review over on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you're watching on YouTube, like the channel, subscribe to the channel. Appreciate the support, and we'll be back soon with another episode of Podcast on the Brink.